show is brought to you by Health Plans, your Medicare plans, insurance solutions, and resource agency. We have a variety of plans and products that fit your needs, benefit requirements, and budget, with many low or no-cost premium plans, zero co-pays, and much more. Our licensed benefits advisor's priority is your health and well-being. Call us today and book your no-obligation consultation. 1-929-367-5269.
Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, with your host, Hurricane Age. New day, new show, new topic, a very powerful topic, something that will probably blow your minds with our guest today. And we're going to talk a little bit about a very unique concept, and it's probably a future concept because something that we should be working on altogether, but we're going to tie all these things. And I'm still kind of right now a little bit ambiguous, and you guys wonder, like, what the hell is he talking about? Well, so simply, this is health, right? And we're talking about business and health and all stuff in previous shows, but there's the environment, there's the economy, there's investments, and how do we tie all that in? How do we basically put this world where, you know, the future of the companies and all the industries and stuff, and how we invest properly so we have a better impact on the environment and ultimately our health. So it sounds like a mouthful, right? So we have somebody with us that actually has multiple backgrounds and an expert in a lot of the things that I just mentioned right now. So without any further ado, I have with me Kevin's son. Kevin, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Hurricane H. Thanks for having me.
Listen, I am excited about this show. I mean, we've talked, you know, you and I met, we've covered a few things, and I really love your background, and you're in investments, you're doing a lot of things, and but your angle about, and you're passionate about this whole topic about how do we invest properly in industries and stuff, and what's the future of industries that can actually help our, you know, nice blue planet, you know, and our environment, and still be, you know, really the right place to put your money into it as an investor, but also to have a positive impact on health, and certainly, you know, have a better future for our children, maybe, and grandkids, right? And so and that's a big topic. I mean, we are in a war, you know, time right now. We are in a very, you know, difficult conflict that could cause, you know, tremendous, you know, harm to this earth. We have we just been through a pandemic, so a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, we had natural disaster going on. People are always worried about financial and in investment and what's the best way to invest. And so, but it all ties down. I mean, it's funny, Kevin. Before you get started, there's something I had a discussion the other day, and someone asked me the question like, "Well, how do you why is it like you have too many topics?" And I said, "Is there anything in life that doesn't affect our health?" There's not. Sure. There is nothing. Yeah. Everything that we encounter in life, you know, somehow has an impact on our health, or we have an impact on the environment somewhere. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's business, if it's relationship, if it's, you know, anything that we do, that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, has to do with our health, physical, mental, doesn't matter, right? And so therefore, whether we talk about business stuff, there is always an impact. If you're not happy at your work, it affects your health. If you have a bad relationship, it affects your health, you know, and so on. So if you're not healthy, it affects your work. So it's funny. If you invest the wrong way, you get stressed, you throw yourself from a building, you know, I mean, God forbid, I mean, it happened, you know, this is, you know, not a joke, it's real stuff that can really be a big impact. Then the environment has the same thing. If the environment is destroyed, you know, it impacts the economy, and the economy, you know, I mean, we've had it in the pandemic, you know, not, you know, just as, you know, a natural or whatever the case may be, a virus comes in and voila, the world shuts down. Economically speaking, we got shut down, you know, and hurt. People got, you know, stressed. People got ill. A lot of things. So the impact is always there. So it's funny. I just wanted to throw in there because I did ask that question, and I never had a chance to actually explain what that relationship is. And today, our show is definitely touching on those extreme ends, like, you know, and how does that work with this? And Kevin, this is your show today, so you want to bang this up, you know, and drive it home.
Well, no, thanks. Well, first of all, Hurricane H, thank you so much for having me on your show. Really a pleasure to be here on a beautiful Saturday in New York City. So you really, I think before I get started, so my background is in investments and legal. And before I say anything, the legal side is going to take over and be all boring. So I just want to put a disclaimer in there that these
Go for it.
viewpoints are mine alone and does not represent any companies, affiliations, or parties who I might engage with. Again, these are all my own personal views. So with that, let's start the fun. Okay.
Actually, I love that, and to be honest with you, it is true. I mean, it's important to always say this because these shows are for education purposes, for knowledge purposes, and it is for everyone watching and listening to do their own due diligence, and whatever your opinion may be, you're entitled to it. And yes, do the research. We give you an angle, a few angles, maybe his view, my views, but sometimes not even our views. I just we're just talking general and propose those things, and then people, you have to make your own extract of what you hear. You grab a couple things, maybe do some further stuff, and maybe it's going to help you, whatever the case may be. So again, I love that disclaimer, and we do have a disclaimer at the end of the show all the time, but the fact is, that's what it is. This is not, we're not attached to anything specific, and even if we express our own stuff, I mean, that's just us. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, so we can agree to disagree sometimes, and it's all good. But for education purpose, or just inspiration, enlightenment, whatever the purpose is, it is important to realize that this stuff is available out there, and sometimes we just rise it to the occasion, rise it up, so you can at least oh, that clicks something here, and you do the work. I mean, it's all good, and whatever you come up with, that's all good. So we love that. We want you to do that work and actually get you excited about it. No worries, you'll find out on your own, whatever the outcome is. That's on you. So thanks, Kevin, for doing that. I mean, you're the first one actually who did that on the show. But again, I don't blame you. I mean, you have a legal background, and actually, you're the second one. I'm sorry. We have a show actually, which is a legal show, which is Legal Tips for Life, and so our guest is an attorney, so we have that live. This is like, you need to seek the counsel of the real stuff. This is just opinion and stuff. So it was similar concept. So I get it. You guys are like, it's drilled in you.
Yeah, no.
And we live in a world that is dangerous too. So.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, man. Sorry, I didn't mean to take that, but it's just fun. It gives that little excitement to the people here listening and watching right now.
Yeah, no. Look, so maybe I can just start off just giving a really brief background about what ESG, sustainability, because I think a lot of people maybe on your show and just society in general have been hearing these lingos being passed around, right? Oh, we have to be more sustainable. If you go to McDonald's nowadays in New York City, for example, now they're using paper straws, right? Before, everyone had plastic straws. What's the intention behind all that? What is the theory? What is the thinking behind all that? And really, it boils down to this concept of environmental, social, and governance, which is E.S.G. This concept is actually not new, because we've always, throughout history of humankind, tried to find ways to better our product, better our services, while keeping in mind that resources are finite, right? There's only so much coal out there. There's so much gold out there, and because of the lack of supply, we have to be good stewardships. We have to be good citizens to protect the environment, and in doing so, hopefully, we can make a profit, right? So this whole concept around ES&G can be explored from an investment side, from a social benefit side, from a I guess sort of the sensitive political side that's been going on these days. But really, from the investment perspective, this concept of ESG and sustainability is not new at all. So I think it started back in the 1960s, where a bunch of investors got together and said, hey, we don't want to invest in X, Y, and Z. And then they kind of precluded that from their investment portfolio. That's how this whole thing kind of started. And then you have the United Nations came on board and came out with all these what they call sustainable goals that they want to achieve. And if you look at it, a lot of it is, no more poverty, water security for all, sort of these very, very really noble goals that we should have. Just it doesn't matter whether you live in, United States or Canada or South America or Spain. It doesn't matter, because we all share these common goals. The drought in California might actually affect upwards of Canada, right? Even though there's a border and there's different governments, but we all share the same concept and the same environment. So the whole goal behind these investments is that okay, we're gonna not invest in companies who invest in coal production because it's polluting to the environment. We're not gonna invest in companies that have who have mistreated indigenous people, right? Who I don't know, or like don't pay their workers well. And what these concepts started to develop throughout these decades is becoming more and more prominent as our population increase. Right now, I think we're about 8 billion people in the world, and because there's so many of us now, there's so little land and resources. Suddenly, these concepts are becoming a lot more prominent, right? And of course, with social media and everything, they're promoting this stuff now. So really, it comes down to at least in my opinion, it comes down to, can these investors who are now playing a very, very strong point in driving this initiative forward, can these investors continue this momentum that started back in the 1960s, and and continue into the future, right? And I think it can, because really, if you look at S&P, right? I think probably a lot of your viewers are brokers, or they want to invest. They've been doing some very interesting studies on companies who are good to their people, who are good to the environment, who are good to like just good social companies out there. And they're traded, the public traded companies on the S&P 500. And there's a bunch of studies out there that actually show that these companies are actually meeting the investment returns of S&P, and there are certain groupings of companies that actually do better than S&P. So can you imagine, if you're a hedge fund owner, if you are a private equity owner, and you're putting your money, billions of dollars of capital against these companies, and you're betting for their success, that is a great result, because these companies are not only doing great in social welfare and all this other stuff that ties with the environment, ties with good governance, but they're also benefiting the investor, right? So, so I threw a lot out there at once.
No. That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, so you actually throw in a lot. You said it, a lot of stuff, and let's just fragment that a little bit. Just a little bit. We're gonna dissect a little bit here. So first, let's talk environment, right? I mean, you said it. I mean, first of all, I think you're the first one that I mentioned 8 billion people, on this planet. I think, we lost count after 7, but I think you're right. You're out there somewhere, and it's only going to go further from there. I mean, unfortunately, if the trends are the way they are, that's just the way it is. This earth is overpopulated, although there's plenty of space still available, but to your point, resources and stuff becomes a little bit more difficult. And sometimes that drives people to do crazy things, right? And push, a little bit the envelope. And that's a difficult task. And you're right, if we don't take care of our world, we will face problems, and those problems will affect, the economy ultimately, because disasters, are a good example right now. Hurricanes and all these environmental shifts, or if you call like weather, things, and it's a lot of discussion. And some people may say it's a hoax, a climate, change is a hoax, whatever the case. And again, we're not debating that today. Everybody's entitled to their own. There's some research this way, some other, the other way. It doesn't matter. Everybody has their own ways why they state the way they state things and why they drive a certain message. Bottom line is, it is happening. The world is changing. There's some natural stuff that's supposed to happen over the millennia, and there's some things that are just expedited because of man's doing. And unfortunately, that is real. And as we see these things, I mean, the impact is humongous, right? And it's happening. And for the most part, you see it. It impacts, the people, humans, animals, nature, your food, everything that we have out there gets simply, when we have a hurricane and you have destructive forces and stuff, areas, of potential, land is devastated. Droughts, you mentioned droughts. That's another one. it's the cycle and the rain and all the stuff that this year, for example, we had a very dangerous, heat wave across the world. That's unheard of. I mean, the weathers have not changed. I mean, they've been kind of all different sporadic, patterns. So these are real things. The world, you mentioned the United Nations and all these, there's all these discussions and unions that are being formed for a better future and environment. And a lot of countries have, you mentioned the straws and other things, and really like the recyclable stuff or nature friendly product. So it is big. And then you mentioned the investment part, right? And so when you talk about investment, you just don't think, at least when I think about it, is like investment, money, profit. That's all. And you're right. In history, this is not new. This is like centuries. There's always the rich, and the rich wants to get richer. And, the more you have money, the more you invest, and you want the more, of things. And you own, multiple, you can own the whole land if you want to, right? If you have enough power to do so. And that's always been the case. But at what, outcome? What's the detriment? What's the actual, end game here? And when you do that sometimes without thinking, now, historically, we could say there was no education about the environment and stuff, but the last decades, as you mentioned, this is all real. Science has proven it. There's a lot of movements out there, and so on and so forth. So it's real and it's happening. And it's funny because you're talking about just the business and the profitability, and at the same time, you're tying it to all this, and that's important for us, watching and listening today, because here's the thing: if you're changing the dynamics, and you are providing a good environment and a healthier environment, and you protecting this, as an investor, to your point, and one of the things that investors look for is like, how is this going to be? If that company crashes, I lose everything, right? But if the company is solid and they're doing a good, then everything is in decline and they're just projected to be better than most, you want to be putting your money in there. But understanding how those dynamics work and which companies you will probably need to invest in requires some research, some work, right? I mean, it's not like, okay, I just look at some trends. Okay, I like this company, but what is their long term, right? Are they going to be sustainable, and then they're going to sustain and be better and be like, the most productive company to invest in. And then and that's the other thing. Then there's the moral compass, right? Some people may not have any moral compass. They're just about the money. And we have those as well in this world. And we have people that actually want to have a healthy balance. I want to make the most profit I can get without hurting the environment, hurting other people. And I want to do the right thing, and sleep, with a good conscience. And that's a difficult task, right? So again, I just wanted to just kind of position those things. And then you have also, to your point, the world, like United Nations. These are all the world leaders coming together, or like, some representatives from all over the world that come in and try to figure out a way to kind of mimic this across the globe. So this way it's not in one area, everybody kind of buys in the same concept. And again, united, we can do more, right? And because to your point, what affects one area here can affect the other stuff there. I mean, it just, other countries, the economies, even just the supply and demand, can be affected with this, chain supply, transportation. I mean, with the pandemic, 3 months, 4 months, everything was lagging. It was a bad, even today, we still have some reminiscences of employment, for example, right? Even productivity and production of certain goods and products are not out there the way they used to be. There's still a delay. So all this stuff is huge. And again, finding that good balance, right? The first part, we need to understand the economic piece of it, and then the environment piece of it. Then the legal, you said governance. So those three things are like, literally they have to go side by side. Now, in your world, Kevin, whether the legal or the financial, world, how do you kind of like, if I'm your client right now, right, and I'm an investor, how is the process to vet out, for example, a company that's going to be really sustainable, and what do I have to be looking for?
No, that's a great question. So ESG now have really became so really, I think from the due diligence perspective of a company, there are certain metrics depending on what industry you're in. Like, I don't know, for example, like pharmaceutical, right? You want to look at the number of intake patients. Like, there are certain data points, metrics that you look at before buying into a particular asset, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ESG, what it has done is that it really pierced some of the black box answers, questions that people were asking. So ESG is now becoming a benchmark for companies to say, okay, I have all of these traditional metrics that you're looking at, right? Whether to buy into me or not, to invest in me into not, right? And to place your money into my company. But now I have environmental factors, right? So just tie it to your viewers in healthcare, right? Like this particular hospital, right? Or this particular pharmaceutical factory. How much pollution are they doing, really? These are type of things that were never really disclosed before, right? And then second of all, there's the social side, right? Like salaries are kept secret for a very long time, and I think there's a lot of privacy behind it, and companies don't really want to review things because there's issues with people being paid too much and people being paid too little. In fact, just kind of putting it in, California just enacted a law that says that everyone has to reveal their salaries before applying for a job, right? So that really kind of settles the inequalities between the top earners and the bottom earners, right? That kind of adds a layer of disclosure. That particular metric was never there before, right? So, and then if you look at just from a healthcare perspective, how many nurses do you guys have? How many doctors do you guys have? What is the retention rate between these nurses and doctors? These are all black box questions, right? That investors never really had an answer to because these things were probably overlooked or they were kept secret within sort of this, because in this industry it's called dressing the pig, right? So you want to make sure that your pig has the right lipstick, get the right hats on, make it all beautiful, but it's still a pig, right? In the end. So really, I think what ESG does is that it adds a funnel, and it really adds transparency into some of the more harder questions that people ask. And on the governance side, for example, right? Like, do you guys have a good board system, right? Hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, they all have strong boards to support their agenda to move forward. Do you have they get donations all the time, right? So like, are you guys open to these donations? Who donated to you guys? Are there, things that you're hiding that I'm not seeing? Right. So that's just, sort of tying into to the healthcare information. But on the other flip side, every industry has their own particular metric. Every single company has their own set of rules. And what ESG is trying to do is say, we have a benchmark now, right? We want to establish some kind of benchmark. We want to say that, oh, your company is socially, beneficial because you do reveal who your top payers are, who your bottom payers are, and you have the right steps there so that your bottom people, right, the people that get paid the least amount of money, you have a path for them to make more money within your company for career development. Or I'm a company and I do a lot of polluting, right, for greenhouse gases because I'm a manufacturer. I have to produce things. Unfortunately, because I'm a manufacturer, I have pollution. But hey, look, in the next 10 years, 20 years, I'm going to invest X millions of dollars into my production lines to make, for example, to reduce greenhouse gases, right? Like, or I'm going to purchase renewable power because my factories run 24/7 and I know I'm using so much electricity, but why not get this electricity for a little bit more money from a renewable power source rather than, for example, gas or coal? Right. Or so these are sort of questions that I think people didn't really particularly look at, sort of these operational metrics versus to traditional metrics of what's your revenue, what's your cost, what's your profit, and then you could do some analysis based on projections and all this stuff. So I think ESG really adds a layer of benchmarking and really makes companies accountable to those that they serve and those who invest in them.
Thank you, Kevin. So a couple of things. First of all, I if you don't mind, Kevin, we talk about ESG, but so who is behind it? Is it a particular government? Is it like, the United Nations, and they have specific, bodies that do this? And how is that already kind of funneling into different countries and different states? Because you mentioned, for example, California as one, but is that throughout the whole? I mean, we have 50 states just in the US, and then you have the Canada, and you have, so how is that? I mean, what is behind the scene working to get this, to the front line? And how is that even impacting the investment, world or the stock, right? And the other question is, um, you mentioned something funny because, well, not funny, but it's interesting to our audiences, the concept of investing, right? Traditionally, I look at stocks, I see like who's doing good, and I'm just okay. I'm just tracking them, and they're looking good. Okay, call my broker, book this one, and we're done. Here's enough money to. So did investors even look at any of this stuff? They just look at who's green, who's red, and how long they're green for, right? And that's really a whole dynamic that you are introducing in today's show, is that there's more to this story now than just looking at some trends and some graphs. Now you got to be, if you really are caring, you should be looking at more. So I'll pose with those two. I mean, I think there's plenty of the answer in there.
So the first one, I think is a great question, right? So who's the driving force behind all of this new concept? And really, I would say that it's the millennials. So if you look at so baby boomers are on their way out, right? And they made a fortune. I think baby boomers in the history of humanity are the wealthiest population of folks ever. Because after World War II, everything started from scratch, and if you got on that boat, guess what? Like rising tide, you're gonna get rich no matter what. So, or at least relatively better off than your parents, right? So all of that money is going to be funneled into the millennials, and then I think it's the Gen X. What is the next generation now? Like
I think Gen Z. I think.
Yeah.
I think I'm X.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So all of that money is going to be transferred over, and I think it's in the trillions. I remember reading something from one of the reports. I mean, it's a lot of money. And with these pools of money, and I think you kind of mentioned it earlier before, economics is all based on people movement. It's based on people's desires, demands. It's all sort of encompassing into the people's dreams and all this stuff. And then we, as society, we work towards our goals, and we will spend money on things we like, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So because of that, there's been a huge transition of the different demands now. People with money, or just the average, for example, investor that invests in the stock. Hey, I want to, I want to see, and from the millennial perspective, I want to see a company not only making me money on the side, right? And I like to see the green, going up, but I like to know that I don't have to feel guilty knowing that I'm, so for example, like H&M, they got in trouble. Oh my Lord, they got in trouble with a lot of the supply chain issues that they had because they were polluting with their clothing and all this stuff. But because of E.S.G, the model of E.S.G and investors now pushing them, right? Now they're saying, okay, we're going to be a lot more green. We're going to be a lot more open about our supply chain, and we're going to pay our people right and all this stuff. Like there's a huge, issue behind this. So really, I think investors are pushing all the industries, not just, your traditional, like clothing industry, whatever it is, wherever this money goes, there's a demand to fulfill, and there's a requirement to fulfill, right? So, number one, that's driven by just millennials. Number one. Number two is driven by government. So there's a Paris Agreement that was launched a few years ago. I mean. Mm-hmm. I think people probably heard of like Al Gore, like, all this stuff back in the day. Yeah, he was one of those champions. We got to reduce our ozone layer. All of that is part of the governance world. And the reason why I think governments are pushing this is because they see the data, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat. I mean, it doesn't matter what party affiliation is. It doesn't matter. Look at carbon emissions, right? Just focus on the facts. Mm-hmm. Carbon emissions have been the highest since ever in the history of mankind. We are now running out of fresh water, right? I think they're saying that, reading an article, Saudi Arabia, right? A lot of the water that they have is not replenishable because they're all underground water that has been there for millions of years from reservoirs, from like literally like inches and inches of raindrop that get stored in because they are, they're not. They've been draining it out so much. Now they're facing issues with like maybe in the next 50 years, they're gonna have no more water. Can you imagine like the amount of economic paralysis a community or a city has, but suddenly that particular, whatever a natural particular resource just completely disappears? So I think governments actually acknowledges these. This is what I call like hard factors. You can't pay your way around water. You can't pay your way around like, oh, I have $1 trillion. I'm going to buy my own air. It doesn't work like that, right? So I think government is now realizing that, hey, we got to do something about this because a lot of the polluting, for example, the Amazons, right? Like they've been doing this very old indigenous way of clearing out forests by burning everything in their path, right? But then what they realize is that because they're doing this, they're harming biodiversity to an extent that is becoming irreplaceable, right? So now you have cities and people that rely on this resource, and in the next 30 years, it's going to be gone. So really, the government is looking: do I even have the money and the capacity to take care of all of my citizens? Right? If you are if you're in America, maybe because we're pretty powerful, we're wealthy, and all this stuff. A lot of banking systems, and we are sort of the drivers behind this. However, if you look at a third world country, we're talking about massive people displacements in the world because of the lack of resources or the overconsumption of these resources, right? So governments are now pushing this agenda, and China and the U.S. are the two top emitters of pollution in the world, and they are, and they're getting together, putting their heads together, to say, what are things that we can do together to kind of maybe eliminate this, right? And then I think the third option. So we talked about investor, we talked about the government, and I think number three is it's just people, like corporations, people. I think corporations realize. So I think if you look at statistics, I think the average public company in America, they before going bankrupt or being merged or whatever the case might be, whatever strategy, if you're listed on the S&P, I think your average lifespan is like maybe 20, 30 years before somebody buys you out or you go bankrupt. So the lifespan of these companies are not very long, right? So if you look at 100-year companies, any company that has met the 100-year mark, woof, like you've done something right. You've lasted through all these cycles, all these changes, and you're still around. Now these companies are saying, okay, what's the next 100 year going to look like? We like to be here. We want to be here because we're a collective force of knowledge, of people, of investors. We want to be here for the next 100 years. So you see a lot of changes happening by companies themselves. So really, I think those are really the three main pillars, right, of driving the change.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I mean, first of all, I love the way you broke it down, and you start with the millennials, and you know what, I wouldn't have thought about that, to be honest with you, because that's not something that the average person is thinking, like, which generation is that a generation piece, right? But you're right. The millennials are different in a lot of ways, and basically this is the age of technology, the age of awareness, and everything is available to everybody today compared to 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, if you don't do the research and you went to like a library, you can't find things,
Right.
Or if the news didn't give you something, you're not going to take it. And the news are driven differently, right? So it was different. Today, the access to, and the computer, the internet, and all the stuff, and the research, a lot of stuff are moving faster, right? And it's changed the dynamic. And I think the millennials as generation, to your point, they're seeing their future. They're also thinking about their kids and grandkids, and you're right. I mean, nothing wrong with the baby boomers, but you're right. I mean, they were there on the outset when everything was reestablishing itself. And if you are at the foundation, you just, to your point, you automatically by default have a chance to make it, right. And of course,
Right.
That's just not everybody did, but those that actually made it in business and investment and stuff, they were able. There was pretty much everything for grabs, right? It's like being in the United States, when they were just going to the West, right? The West conquest, and going just like, hey, take as much land as you can, just put some poles in your hands. It's the same thing. Like you're starting, everything is for grabs, but things have changed. And to your point, also the population is increasing, all the stuff. And you're right. Also, what we've noticed in the last few decades is with the environment is beyond what we've had before. I mean, and it's escalating at a rapid rate. It's not like, a lot of things that we observe today have been happening over the centuries, but they're at a very slow rate. But now it's almost like double time. I mean, 100 times faster, right? It's like just like super speed. And so therefore the damage is much, much bigger. So I appreciate the fact that you said that, because it is great to understand, that there's a driver, and it's the new mentality. It's the way you think as millennials is different. And again, I mentioned I'm from the 70s, so I'm just before that generation. And again, we're like in the middle of all. We're kind of like, we're still catching up to both sides. We're like have a little remnants here, and we're actually, some of us caught up quicker than others, but that's it. So we're in the middle. And I think the boat is a little, I think the ship is sailing for us, but you guys are really it. And I frankly think that the millennials are actually holding the fort better, because I'm not even sure about the new generation. The jury's out still. They're still young, right? But so that's one thing. And then you mentioned something about the fact of just the changes, right, that's happening in the environment, and the different, like the Paris agreement, and where again, even the Paris agreement, I know our previous administration did not really buy into some of the concept there. So there's you have these things that are happening worldwide, but then not everybody buys in at the right time, and so a couple of years is enough to make more damage in this environment when you're not part of the bandwagon. So you want to get together. You want to do this, and I love what you said about finally the U.S. and China are getting together, because we are big producers, right? And there's so much impact that we have in the environment, whether we like it or not. That's a problem. I talked about some of these factories that just basically have high emissions, right? And obviously greenhouse effect and warm air, desalination of the North Pole. I mean, the glaciers melting away. I mean, all that stuff is real. It's happening. You can't hide. To your point, the facts are the fact. You can say whatever you want. I love what you said about Saudi Arabia, because I actually did go to Saudi Arabia, and I can tell you, you're right. There is no rain. I mean, I happened to attend 2 events where there was rain. But the fact is there is none, and there's no lakes or nothing. I mean, most of the stuff is purified water or like you said, well water. I mean, so underground. But how much of that can you sustain? And the projections are clear. I mean, you got the UAE. I mean, most of their water right now is desalination water. So you got all that stuff. But even with that, I mean, what, you're going to drain the oceans? I mean, water is we have to live with it. Air, to your point, if we can't breathe correctly, is a problem. Now, it's funny because during the pandemic, because the world got locked down for about 3 months, somehow the ozone found a way to start, the ozone layer was getting better, right? And that just proves that, again, to your point, fact is facts. You can't deny it. You can't hoax it. You can't, cover it up. There's nothing. It's just the numbers, right? And I love what you said also about the concept of how the average company on the ESP, is 30 years, 20 something years, but not a lot of them don't stay a lot, right? And some of them stay, and they're doing something for that purpose, because they're adapting. That's really the key. Is like the environment's changing, the world's changing. We have to also adjust as a business, as an entity. But now, if we go behind the scene, all of this is driven by one thing, and I think that's profit. And when you talk profit, you talk greed. And we might have to we're going to open up a little bit of a, Pandora's box here. But the problem is human nature is all about me, myself, and I. And it's unfortunate, we all kind of like look at myself and me like, me, myself, and I as first, I'm number one. And in any aspect of it, I mean, you, me as individuals, you still have to look at after yourself and your family. You work for yourself, you work for your family. And so and then how much can I get? That's the thing. I think people are so greedy that they don't stop at a point. They just, you can be trillionaire and you still want more. Like you can't even count your numbers, but you still want more. And you don't care what that impact is out there, whether on human lives, the environment stuff, because you're so far behind it and you're not even in it. And it may even affect you, because to your point, if you run out of air, it doesn't matter. You can't do anything. I mean, the pandemic is a good example. People with money, but didn't matter. You were locked in. I mean, very few people were able to do things the way they did, before the pandemic. During the pandemic, almost everybody got locked down. Almost everybody had limitations to what they could do and where they can go, and food supplies and stuff. Yeah, you might buy more because you have access, but it still was lesser and lesser and lesser. And if this happens where it's tragic and there's something more, devastating around this world, it's over. It doesn't matter. Money is not going to buy you those things. I'm a movie buff, and one of the movies, types I love is like in either space movies where they're aliens or disaster movies, and those actually show the good and the bad of humanity. Because you can see how people very quickly become destructive, hurtful, and selfish. Because the survival of the fittest concept comes in. Self-preservation gets in the business the way, and people are owing. And then you always have in those stories, like the group that actually makes the difference and works for a better future and recreates this world. But when you look at these things, these are just sci-fi ideologies and stuff. But you deep dive in them, you see that stuff happening for real. They just give it to us in a very Hollywood or some other type of movie production concept. But the fact is real. But again, that greed is our problem. Unfortunately, to your point, there's not enough. Well, I don't think there's enough education about all this. And even like again mentioned, media is one way to do it, and they cover it to a degree, but they're still not fully blasted, right? It's not out there. Shows and maybe people are doing their own podcasts and things like that here and there to share some of this stuff, and experts coming in, are limited. I mean, now it's more than ever. But that's actually changing, and I think that's important, for our world to hear these messages and understand it from a different angle. Like again, if you and I did not meet, I may not have known about these things, right? And we had this discussion, like, hey, let's do the show because it's information that should be shared with people, and most of us are just not aware of all this stuff and what it can be. And that's one part. Now that leads me to the question: is what can we do as individuals right now to really help in this in the future? I mean, we all live, and in order for us to survive this world and make it better for our next year. I mean, I have kids, and sometimes I look at my kids and I don't know how you guys are going to live in the future because it is already tough. I mean, now by the time you're my age, I'm not even sure your kids, my grandkids, how the world's going to look like for them. It is terrible when you think about it. Like, it is not. I mean, right now you want to think there's no World War III coming. Yet you cannot, waive that idea because there's still a lot of, different question marks about it, right? Hopefully that never happens. God forbid if it happens, forget about this discussion will probably be irrelevant right now, But the fact is, we wish that those crazinesses, in the world can diminish and disappear. But again, human nature will still be there. But what can we do as individuals to really educate ourselves more about how to be part of this movement, and whether through education, through proper investing, and also just kind of like sharing this wealth of knowledge to other folks, so we can actually get more people into this realm and hopefully awareness model, so we can all succeed and have a better future.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. So you're absolutely right. People are greedy, and that's just human nature, right? Like we always like more things, and I think social media to a point kind of play that out, right? I was always thinking, if we didn't have all these Instagram influencers, would people actually realize like how the rich actually lives, right? If you don't have showing off your cars, your houses, and all this stuff, like would people actually have the mental capacity, or even just being revealed or exposed to this level of information? And I say that because I think we could do the same with getting this message across, right? So the next time when you're shopping in a shopping mall and you see, for example, bottled water, right, which is one of the most polluting thing ever, you think about, okay, well, what kind of plastic is this, right? Where are you getting this plastic from? How are you bottling your water? How are you transferring gallons or trillions of gallons of water from point A to point B and then ship it out to me? All of these are costs. That's not exactly priced into the product themselves right now. Because in the end, I think we like cheap stuff, but we don't really want to think about like, okay, I don't want to think about that, this water is coming from Saudi Arabia. It's like the most refined. I don't want to think about that. I just want to get my water. I want to enjoy myself. And to a point, there's no fault in that because that's just how we are. Mm-hmm. Right. But I think ultimately, if we, everything starts local, right? You have people in Miami, for example. Suddenly you have these. So I think in Miami, for example, the rising tides. I think right now that every single time that there's a high tide, downtown Miami gets flooded. That's literally once a day, right? All of these impacts due to weather changes or whatever. It could be China's emitting all of these carbon emissions from from all their factories, but in return is affecting sea rise in Miami. These things are not exactly clearly linked to each other, which is why it's so hard to kind of get the message out. But one thing is certain: if you live in an area, and in 10 years ago, the weather or the whatever that you're facing is different than what you're facing now, then you're probably within this impact zone of climate change or the changing of however you want to phrase it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's due to all of the human activities that's been happening with the complete. I think if more people understood what actually happens behind the scenes, people are going to be a lot more conscious. And I think we have a lot of these products now. For example, I think they buy water in paper. I think paper is now making a comeback. Right, plastic was the force for like the good 30 years, and now paper is coming back, right? But to an extent, it does help. But then now you're gonna ask, okay, well, what's the next step, right? Like how can I be helpful to the environment while benefiting myself? I think that's really, really the question. And the reason I mention Miami is because first of all, I love Miami. It's wonderful.
I love Miami. Yeah. Beautiful city.
Yeah. But really, I think people are now saying Miami needs to create these billions of dollars of floodgates.
Levies?
Yeah, levies, right? Like these are because without it, Miami is going to be underwater, right? Well, like south of Florida is going to be underwater, and that's going to completely affect the fresh water supply. Can you imagine, like for example, Lake Mead is dry, is dried out, right? But the thing is, it's hard for people to say, okay, it's because Lake Mead and Miami is drowning. It is because of my shopping habits that's contributing to this. It's hard to make that link because the information is still a black box. To a certain extent, it's still very much a black box. But I think there's always a silver lining to this because I think when there's enough people feeling the effect locally, that's going to ultimately drive upwards, right? Bad harvest. If you're a farmer, you used to be able to yield, for example, within an acre of lot, you used to be able to yield like let's say $2,000-$3,000. Now you can only get maybe half the thing because your crops die or there's drought or there's too much stuff. You feel it, and then you're going to ask yourself, why is this happening? And all of this information is going to funnel up into a bigger picture. And I think. And ultimately, you can always educate people. You could tell them, but then they have to feel it. Without that feeling, it's going to be very, very hard.
It's amazing. You mentioned something about, and we'll talk about some of the other points here, but something about the crops, right? Something that I can tell you personally, it's affecting my business, one of our business is, so we do have like a skincare cosmetic company, right? And one of the products we have is prickly pear seed oil. So this is like, if you know what prickly seed pears are looking like. I mean, they're very thorny and it's only they grow in some harsher weather, right? So you have them like, so I'm originally from Morocco, so that's one of the areas we get those seeds from. This past year, there's a little bug that actually infested the whole crop. It's over. And so that whole little thing, that liquid oil went from like, $5 to $50, right. Cost wise. and you can't even get that actual quality product because that whole harvest is gone. Now you have to replant all these little things and have them grow, and it takes about 5 years to actually start getting the real fruits. So it's and who knows what drove that particular bug this year to this area, and it's moving out west. And the only places you can really purchase now these things are either Mexico, Tunisia, or Morocco, but it's very limited. And now the cost is crazy. And you might not think about it, but that's actually the environment creating some of these things. Those migrations or those bugs or whatever it is, they move in. There's a reason for it. Maybe there's something that's lacking. We're not just putting the connection, but you're right. It affects everybody. And when you think about it, like, damn, you said something about where I'm walking to the store, I'm not thinking about all those other big events that are happening, but you're right. It's funny. You put it in such a very subtle way, just a water bottle. No one is drinking that water when they're thirsty and thinking about the bottle, who manufactured it, where it came from, how it was bottled, and what kind of energy it used. None of us would ask that question. We just drink the water, and frankly, we paid for water that should be just, free. That's another story. I mean, you can have just a fountain and you're good. I mean, as a matter of fact, it's funny because you have fountains. Some in these places, people don't use that water. They just go get, bottle. I mean, hygiene, safety, pandemic, whatever. Some of that stuff drives that. But there's also marketing, right? And there's a lot of debates about what's in the water in the first place. Is it really purified? Is it distilled water? Is it actually just tap water? And some people say that's what it is. So when you think, we don't think about those things, but you're right. The awareness. And that's like knowledge is key, right? If you're aware, you'll start seeing things differently. It's like we always refer to the Matrix, the movie, because the blue pill and the red pill, right? Once it's a whole different way of thinking, right? You're not in the same concept, but when you're like robotic and you just kind of like zombied, into like, this is how it is, boom. You talked also about the influencers, right? And you're right. Like I have this discussion all the time. 30 years ago, when the TV was limited, the channel there were before the internet, you would have literally to go search for something. You need to know what to search for, right? Now, you got these things popping and people actually showing off. Like, I was watching this TikTok, whatever, the other day, and this guy's asking people like, how much are you wearing? And these folks are wearing $100,000 on their wrist, right? Now it creates a little bit of a challenge for people, because if I see that, I get excited too. And then if you go also on the TV, on Netflix, what they have these series about these people and billionaires. By the way, I have nothing against them. I'm an ambitious, prospect. If you want to do more, make more, great. But I'm saying that some people now tend to do whatever it takes to reach those levels, and despite of whatever that means to the environment or the health or whatever, because it's no more about, I am thinking about that. I'm just thinking, I want that. I want this bad. And it creates this feeling that, you're no more in the mode of caring. You just care about making more. It's challenging, right?
No, yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, in terms of, it's just, the reason I'm hesitant, right, is because I honestly don't feel like we have too much time left. And the reason is because, and I'm not saying we're all gonna disappear in a year or two, but the transition to a greener planet, the transition to a less pollutant planet, needs to happen at a quicker pace. And I think there's a lot of issues that kind of roadblocks that, right? So now that we're all connected more than ever, from the technology, from the data, from everything, I also feel like we're more excluded than ever, right? Because, like you said, there's just so much information out there, and we, as a population, we can only focus on so many things at once. There's too much information. So really, if ultimately, just me personally, I just want to see, like, just to give you the water bottle example, how much you're paying in the store and what's the actual cost of the production. If people can actually compare those two items and be like, oh, I'm buying this thing for 99 cents because, hey, it's on sale. But if there's an actual cost, what if for you to buy this bottle of water, it costs $6 to make? Then I think it's like, well, no, it could happen. Maybe like, oh my God, the deal is even amazing. And then they'll buy more. But I think, for example, the cost of environment or cost of things. And the reason why I say that is because the the shift of the change is happening so fast.
Mm.
The technology is not there yet. We don't have a good way to refine water. Our basic water refinery is still based on the old concept of drainage and blah blah blah. There's no advanced technology for that yet. There's no advanced technology to carbon capture some of these carbon issues that we're facing right now in the world. The technology is it's developing, but it's developing at a slower rate than the harm that we're doing to the environment. So eventually, in economics, it's what we call the break-even point. Eventually, something's going to give, right? It depends on how it's going to be the environment, or hopefully we're all smart enough and we can get there faster at a faster rate. I hope Miami's is still going to be there in 10 years. I want to go party in Miami. I hope Las Vegas is still going to be there, and without now, I can only take 10-minute showers. I can only take 5-minute showers, without these water controls, because ultimately everything that we do affects somebody else, right? And I think, yeah.
It is amazing, man. I mean, you throw in some stuff that is super scary. I mean, you would have never heard about us in the US having to worry about water, supplies and to your point, like shutdowns. And by the way, that's pretty common in a lot of other places in the world. I mean, I was in the summertime overseas, and in some parts, that's exactly what they did. The water was actually shut down because of the drought. They will give you like a couple hours a day that you actually have access to water. So you have to fill in your stuff and tub, whatever you need. And if you need to shower, you got to do it quick. Otherwise, and there was so much awareness on TV about it. It is, you don't see it because, again, we're so used to comfort. And then, oh my God, all of a sudden, like what's going on? But you're right. If we're not in the right speed, and moving faster rather than, in terms of figuring out solutions to actually mitigate all these problems, to your point, that break point doesn't look to our favor right now. It looks like the other way around, and that's where we have massive, decline, and that can also mean social and everything else after that. Because once you get to that point, now it's survival of the fittest, and we become basically animals in terms of behavior, right? And that's dangerous. And again, there is a point of no comeback, no return. That's it. What you get to a critical mass, level, it's too late. It's just too late, and it's just over. We hope that scenario never happens. And I think, today's show is just one of the few potential, awareness shows that with people, or at least educational shows, where at least we spark that little like, oh my God, this is real. It's happening. Well, it is, and we don't have to like use what I refer to always as the ostrich effect. Just dump our head on the ground and and expect that nothing's going to harm us. It's real. It's happening, whether you like it or not. You better face it up front and know at least what's coming, as opposed to just like, it's not my problem. But if it's not your problem, it's your kid's problem. If it's not their problem, it's your grandkids. If you love your kids, you know that this is happening. And if you don't have kids yet, it's your family, your kids, your nephews, whatever. Your neighbor, it doesn't matter. If you care, enough, you would know that this is impacting. And you're right. This stuff is all over us. I love what you say. Would love to see Miami, be there. But this is actually not new. I mean, we've been talking about like some of the sea is rising across the whole earth, and the water is there. And there's not even that. There's the other one, desalination of the seas and the oceans. If we get to a point where that's critical, it's over. I mean, that's the peak of what cataclysmic, a cataclystic, or cataclysm, environmental, worldwide problem. It happens that way, it's over. And if you dump a lot more water from those glaciers into the oceans, you're changing the saline and the level of all that stuff in the water, and that changes the dynamics, and you'll have more storms, and you forget about it. It's and we've seen those, like it's funny because you watch movies and they're not just movies, they're actually awareness, almost commercials to like, hey, this is happening. So they give you an entertaining version of it, so you get excited about it. But they're not just telling you this is just for fun. This is real. It's happening. They don't use those facts as, just like out of their mind. This is not real sci-fi. It's real things. They try to portray them in a way that is, like attractive. So you watch them and makes you aware. But if we are not doing our part, and I think everybody is welcome to join this, worldwide, if you're listening to this, at least do your part, right? If, to your point, the society, 8 billion starts with 1% at a time. And if each one of us starts doing their part about it, whatever small part it is, to maybe limit how much your imprint is in some of these things, recycling, not recycling, all these things can make a difference. Buying the right things, investing in the right companies. This way you can encourage those companies to actually grow and do more. That's powerful. But if you're clueless, well, we just part of the same problem, right? And we definitely are. You wouldn't destroy your own house, right? and our houses is a small piece, but our city is a part of it. Our country is a part of it, and the world, and the globe is part of it, because that is our house. We live on this earth, and even if you survive, how can you live in a world that is in disaster mode? When tragedy strikes and when those natural disasters hit, people suffer, and it's not fun. So we just had a hurricane, that was devastating in Florida, and my son just finally got actually power. They've had no power for days, and that's just a simple thing. And some people lost their homes. To your point, anything that's by the water is usually flooded, and now you're done. It's dangerous, and investing the right way, and selecting which companies you put in your money in. You'll still make the profit, but you just make it, while at least consciously you're getting the right impact. While you make it, it's good for both, right? It's a win-win for all. Why not? So we're coming to the end of the show, Kevin. I know you want to say something, and what would be whatever you're saying now, plus what would be like some of the core advice you would share, towards the end of this show, and maybe something that can enlighten people's minds.
Yeah, well, thanks. So I think you brought up a lot of amazing points there, and I just, because I know a lot of listeners are in the healthcare profession. I am no means an expert in this profession, but I just want to kind of leave everyone with this one thought, right? The amount of new medicines that gets introduced into the pipeline for pharmaceutical company, some of them is synthetic, but all of these ingredients that they put together to try to save people, to try to cure something, it all comes from the environment, because all of these plants, these flowers, these biodiversity, these beautiful natural things, all feed into this pill that's going to cure you or help you in some way. The issue now is that the biodiversity across the world is being harmed at such a rapid rate that Mother Nature, or whoever you want to call it, cannot replenish these resources. And ultimately, it's going to affect human health. Because now I have a headache, I go get Advil, Tylenol. But these ingredients are going to disappear, and then companies are always going to try to find substitutes. Eventually, the substitutes are going to disappear because of the environmental changes. And I think ultimately we're really just killing ourselves. So I just want to leave with just one comment that, healthy mind, healthy body, healthy environment, that's all going to equal to more money. So
I like that. So you tied it back into money, just as a true finance guy, a true investment guy. But I love it. But again, we don't have a limit on the time as much. But you mentioned something powerful, because to your point, those resources that are in nature, if they're scarce and they disappear, to your point, again, you don't think about that. Like, it's in your medicine. If you can't get the medicine, then you're not going to be healthy. And then the risks of disappearing through disease and other problems and death, is just imminent. So it is all tied in. It's all linked. There's no, this and that. And whether it's through the pollution piece of it or the lack of the resources, one way or the other, we're impacting it. And it's sad that we are our own destructive power. We are, unfortunately, the ones who are doing this, and I would say we as a humanity, we and it's so sad. I want to go back to that baby boomer thing that you said, and this not to do with the baby boomers in itself. It's individuals in general, right? When individuals, they just care about their rich, environment. Meaning, I'm talking like, I want to make as much crazy money, and I don't care what the impact is, who's going to get hurt in the process. That's when it becomes a problem. And unfortunately, whenever there's money involved, sometimes the ethics and the moral compass gets thrown away. It's like it doesn't exist anymore, right? That's just, and again, something that at least the more we talk about it, the more people like we all have that nice little moral compass within. Doesn't matter who we are. We can be, I don't think humans are evil. Humans are loving by default, but we all have that little evolution, piece of us, that little whisper, right? But if we can just kind of reinforce our good, versus bad, and hopefully, I think that can change the way we think. If you have to invest, and you have a choice, and you always have a choice. You may not make $1 million, you may make $500,000, but it will be a cleaner $500,000. Maybe that's worth it. Don't be just, and that $500,000 will probably triple in no time if it's doing the right way. And so if we start that way alone, that can change the whole thing. So let's not always worry about like quick riches and making a lot of, moolah for in no time. And with disregard of everything else. And again, if we know what the impact is, and I think people out there, if you're listening and watching, share the show, with people so people are aware and they all can actually benefit from this, by at least using these concepts and invest all the way. Kevin is in the investment world, and he would not tell you not to, but invest the right way, sustainable, companies and things like that. Think future, not think now, and there will be a shift. We've seen shifts, like to your point. There's been all the way, but it's a slower shift. Let's just make this a little bit more of a blanket and more larger scale, and hopefully we can expedite that whole change and it's a shift of mind. It's really just, we talk about mindset and everything. This is an invested mindset. You're just switching to a different way of investing in the right way. And then the rest is history. To your point, you can invest in coal and some other, or you can solar energy, for example. It does not have the same impact, right? Just simple and that. Renewable energy, you said it. It's something different than actually something that is, drilling on the ground. You mentioned, it was interesting. You talked about the bottle that costs $6 and it's cheaper here. Like you would think, like, what is that? Like, how can that even be a profitable, But then you don't realize that somebody is making that bottle somewhere. And how much can they possibly be making if you're buying it for like 50 cents? Talk about labor, right? The impact on that, so it's so much stuff that, we just don't spark that, we don't, it's like that eureka bulb, like, I see it, it's like, it's always dim. It's like, it's off. Switch that thing on and things will be so lucid, it's not even funny. And you'll start seeing that we are part of the problem, and any one of us can make the difference. And that's all there is. We're not asking for any movements here or political stuff. It's just about taking, the necessary step individually, and the world will start making, becoming a better place for all of us. And that's all I have to say.
Amazing, man. Yeah.
All right, Kevin, this was a powerful, man, show, and you brought in a whole different angle of and spin to our well-being. As a humans, and again, it is health. It impacts us one way or the other. We want it, we don't. It's going to impact us, and it's impacting us today. The air we breathe, the water we drink. It's amazing. So thank you for really bringing this. And I know when we met and we talked about, it's like, oh, this is like something special, and like, again, investing. Who would know, right? That's like financial world. But yet it is as core to our real problems in this world and to our health as it can be. So Kevin, if someone wants to reach out to you, is there any place you want them to, reach out to you, just to maybe for advice, or whether it's for investment, proposition, or for any other type of situation?
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there.
Okay.
But yeah, look, I really appreciate you having me on your show, and look, whatever opportunity I have, I love to spread the word, as they say, and I think, educating just across the spectrum. It doesn't matter if you're Z or boomer, it doesn't matter. Just kind of sharing that good knowledge and having that really, I think, saving the planet. It's really, it saves the planet, save ourselves.
Oh, that's a good line. I think, that's the title of the show today.
Perfect.
All right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being with us and taking time on your Saturday here. But we really enjoyed it. And this is a good show. And I think there's a lot of information that people can benefit worldwide. So thank you, folks. Thank you for being with us, watching, listening in, and hopefully this was entertaining as well as informative. So stay tuned for a new show, new guest, new topic. Bye for now.